Pain often comes uninvited, and when it does, our first reaction is usually confusion or fear. We wonder why things are falling apart, why prayers seem unanswered, and why God allows us to suffer. But pain is not a punishment, it's a process. It's the language through which God refines us, shapes our hearts, and prepares us for a higher purpose. When you start to see pain as preparation, you begin to grow stronger instead of bitter. Every challenge has a hidden message. Sometimes it's about patience, sometimes it's about trust. When everything is taken away, you learn what truly matters. When the doors close, you discover the power of prayer. Pain strips away illusions and reveals truth. It shows us who we are and who God is. Every tear carries wisdom, and every scar tells a story of survival and grace. Think about nature. A seed must be buried in darkness before it grows into a tree. Likewise, your pain may feel like burial, but it's actually planting. The same soil that buries you today will sustain you tomorrow. When God allows pressure, it's because He's preparing promotion. He doesn't waste pain, He transforms it into purpose. So when you're walking through the fire, don't give up. Your pain is not random. It's part of your calling. Every hardship is shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The pain you feel today will one day become the power behind your testimony. Faith shines brightest in the darkest times. When everything goes wrong and life seems unfair, faith is the quiet voice that whispers, "God is still here." It doesn't deny reality, but declares that God is greater than reality. Faith doesn't eliminate fear, but it gives you strength to stand in the middle of it. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego reminds us that faith doesn't always save us from the fire. Sometimes it saves us in the fire. God didn't prevent them from entering the flames, but He joined them there. The fire didn't burn them, it burned their chains. This is how God works. What was meant to destroy you can actually deliver you. When your life feels like a furnace, trust that you are not alone. God's presence is strongest where the heat is highest. The flames that scare you are often the same flames that shape you. Every time you choose to believe in the middle of the storm, your faith grows deeper, stronger, and more unshakable. Faith in the fire is not about comfort, it's about courage. It's about standing firm when everything else is falling apart. If you can hold on through the heat, you'll come out refined like gold, shining with the glory of your testimony. There comes a moment in every believer's journey when God feels distant. You pray and hear nothing. You seek and find no answers. Silence can feel like rejection, but it's often redirection. God's silence is not absence, it's strategy. When He is quiet, He's preparing something greater than what you asked for. Remember, the teacher is always silent during the test. When God seems to step back, it's not because He stopped caring, it's because He's testing your faith. Will you still trust Him when the blessings pause? Will you still worship when you don't feel His presence? Those moments of silence reveal the strength of your relationship with Him. During the silent seasons, God is working behind the scenes, aligning people, timing, and opportunities. Just because you can't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. Roots grow in silence before fruit appears in the open. trust that God is doing something sacred in the unseen. So don't let silence shake your faith. Keep praying, keep believing, and keep walking. The same God who was silent in your test will speak loudly in your testimony. His timing is perfect, and when He finally moves, you'll understand why He was quiet. Life can bring us to moments of complete breakdown, times when we feel lost, empty, and without hope. Yet it's in those moments that God begins His greatest work. What feels like destruction is often divine reconstruction. Sometimes God has to let everything fall apart so He can rebuild it stronger, better, and more aligned with His will. Every breakdown is a sacred opportunity. When you hit rock bottom, you find the rock that doesn't move. You stop depending on your own strength and start leaning on God's strength. Your tears become prayers, and your pain becomes a pathway to transformation. The enemy wants you to believe that your story ends in failure, but God is already writing your comeback. Think about Joseph, betrayed, sold, imprisoned. For years, his life seemed to fall apart, but every setback was actually a step toward destiny. When the time was right, God lifted him from the prison to the palace. The same hands that hurt him became the ones that needed him. That's how divine reversal works. Your breakdown does not define you, your breakthrough does. Don't rush the process. Every fall teaches you to rise. Every heartbreak opens space for healing. When you look back, you'll realize the moment you thought was your ending was actually your transformation. We all love mountaintop moments, the victories, the blessings, the answered prayers. But the truth is, growth happens in the valley. The valley is the place of testing, learning, and transformation. It's where faith becomes real and dependence on God deepens. Without the valley, the mountain would mean nothing. David didn't become a hero by standing in the palace. He was shaped in the wilderness. Alone with his sheep, he faced lions and bears, not knowing those battles were training him for Goliath. The valley prepares you for the victory ahead. What feels like isolation is actually divine preparation.
When you walk through valleys of grief, sickness, or loss, don't mistake it for abandonment. God walks beside you, even when you can't feel Him. His silence doesn't mean His absence. The shadows around you are proof that light is still near. Every valley teaches lessons the mountaintop never could. So don't curse the valley. Thank God for it. It's where roots grow deep and character is formed. The valley humbles you, molds you, and gets you ready for your next elevation. The deeper the valley, the higher the mountain waiting ahead. Fear is one of the greatest enemies of faith. It whispers lies into your mind, convincing you that God has forgotten you or that the future is hopeless. But fear is simply faith pointed in the wrong direction, believing more in the problem than in the promise. When you learn to redirect that energy toward trust in God, everything begins to change. Faith silences fear because it shifts your focus from what's visible to what's eternal. In Scripture, we see how fear almost stole Peter's miracle. He walked on water, defying the laws of nature, until he took his eyes off Jesus and looked at the storm. The moment he focused on the waves, he began to sink. That's the power of perspective. The storm didn't grow stronger. His faith grew weaker. The key to overcoming fear is to keep your eyes on Christ, not the chaos. Fear will always knock at your door, but you decide who answers. Faith doesn't mean you feel brave. It means you choose to act brave despite your feelings. Each time you choose faith over fear, you build spiritual muscles that can withstand greater storms. The more you trust, the less you tremble. So when fear comes about the future, finances, or family, speak faith instead. Declare God's promises out loud. Remind yourself that He has never failed you before, and He won't start now. Fear may roar, but faith will always win when you refuse to bow to doubt. Perseverance is the bridge between faith and fulfillment. It's easy to start with enthusiasm, but endurance is what separates dreamers from achievers. God often delays the blessing not to deny you, but develop you. He wants to see if you can remain faithful when the miracle doesn't happen overnight. Perseverance proves that your faith is not dependent on circumstances. The story of Job is the ultimate example. He lost everything, family, wealth, and health, yet he refused to curse God. His faith was tested beyond measure, but he stayed firm. When his trial ended, God restored double what he had lost. That's the reward of perseverance, double blessings for double pain. When you don't give up, you invite divine compensation. Many people stop right before their breakthrough. They get tired, discouraged, or impatient. But remember, the darkest part of the night comes just before dawn. Every step you take in perseverance moves you closer to victory. God sees your endurance, your tears, your prayers, and none of it is wasted. So keep pushing, keep praying, keep believing. The same God who began a good work in you will complete it. Your breakthrough might be just one more prayer away, one more step of faith away. Perseverance turns trials into testimonies because it transforms you from a believer into a conqueror. Gratitude is the secret weapon of the strong. It doesn't deny pain, it redefines it. When you thank God in the middle of suffering, you shift the atmosphere around you. Gratitude invites God's presence, and His presence brings peace that surpasses understanding. It turns your focus from what's missing to what's still working. Paul and Silas understood this truth. Imprisoned and beaten, they didn't complain, they sang. Their praise shook the foundations of the prison, and the chains fell off. That's what gratitude does. It opens doors that worry keeps locked. When you choose to worship instead of weep, heaven responds. Gratitude in suffering doesn't come naturally. It comes spiritually. It's a decision, not an emotion. It's saying, God, even if you don't fix this, I still trust you. That kind of gratitude confuses the enemy because it proves that your faith is unshakable. When you thank God in the storm loses its power over you. So start your day with gratitude. Thank God for the breath in your lungs, the lessons in your pain, and the strength to endure. Gratitude doesn't change your situation immediately, but it changes you. And once your heart changes, everything else begins to follow. Your testimony is not just your story, it's God's signature on your life. Every trial you overcome becomes evidence of His faithfulness. When you share your journey, you become a light for someone still walking through darkness. What once caused you pain can now bring someone else healing.
Every time you speak of God's goodness, you multiply its impact. Your words can reach hearts you'll never meet and spark faith you'll never see. You never know who needs to hear that deliverance is possible, that healing is real, that God still performs miracles. Your testimony might be the lifeline someone has been praying for. So don't hide your story. Tell it boldly. Let your past glorify God, not define you. Speak life into others. Share the journey and watch how your words transform lives. The miracle God performed for you wasn't meant to end with you. It was meant to flow through you. The ultimate goal of every trial is transformation. God is less concerned with changing your situation than He is with changing you. Every storm, every delay, every disappointment is shaping your character, building your faith, and aligning your soul with His purpose. When you emerge from the trial, you are no longer the same person. You are stronger, wiser, and more radiant with grace. Transformation is what turns a victim into a victor. The pain that once broke you becomes the platform where you stand and testify. What used to hurt now helps others heal. You begin to see how every detail of your story fits into a divine pattern. Nothing wasted, nothing lost, everything redeemed. When you look back, you'll realize that the hardest seasons were the holiest ones. That's where you met God, not in the comfort, but in the chaos. You didn't just survive, you evolved. You learned that your strength doesn't come from you, it comes from the one who carried you through. This is the true power of testimony, transformation that glorifies God. You become living proof that faith works, that grace restores, that love conquers all. Your story becomes a song of victory, and your life becomes a lighthouse, guiding others through their own storms.